we have an opportunity here to reimagine what this relationship is going to look like. Because I think, as Trustee Crosby also pointed out, there are going to be times, whether we formally disband the SRO program, where we are going to have engagement with law enforcement. But I'm very concerned with seeing the data that clearly disproportionately shows that particularly our Hispanic and Latinx students are disproportionately on the receiving end of arrests and encounters with our SROs. And I'm wondering, is there any explanation for that? Because it's alarming.
If you look, and I'll refer back to Trustee Sweeney's comments about if you look at the total number of arrests based on the number of students, and let's just think of high school students alone. One incident that occurred at one of our local high schools involved a fight that involved students of a certain race. And as a result of that, understanding, like other trustees have mentioned, we have to keep our students safe. We have to keep our staff safe. If you look at the numbers, and I think the data was provided at one high school, that one incident involved several students. So if you were to evaluate that incident and take the number down from 8 to 2, then your percentages would drop drastically. The other thing that I would like to mention is when we talk about arrests, most people would think it's when we're putting a student in handcuffs and transporting them to jail. The data, when it talks about arrests or referrals, if you look at the data between the 2 years, the number of students that were actually transported to juvenile hall was 1. So when you think about referrals, when you think about arrests, what we're trying to do is, our goal is not to place handcuffs on our students. And I speak, as a, product of Fremont Unified School District, growing up in the community as an African American. We don't focus on arresting children of color. It's important that you understand that our goal is to provide resources, referrals through resources, through diversion, the programs that we've talked about. It's really to help the kids. And what Trustee Sweeney had mentioned earlier.
But I do think it is time for us to remove SROs from being permanently stationed on our campuses. My vote on this matter is public record. I voted to terminate the SRO relationship and not have officers stationed on our campus anymore. And it's no surprise to anybody, it's public knowledge that I voted to remove the SRO program. I would just like to point out, Trustee Sweeney, you mentioned that there was only 1 arrest in the last 2 years. If you take a look in the SRO task force documents, the consolidated response exhibit B that's attached in those documents, the information that was provided to us by the Fremont Police Department documents 25 arrests in 2 years, and they provide details about what those arrests were for. So there was definitely more than 1 arrest in the 2-year period.
Thank you for pointing that out. I take exception to the data, but this isn't the venue for that now.
The other thing that I would like to mention is when we talk about arrests, most people would think it's when we're putting a student in handcuffs and transporting them to jail. The data, when it talks about arrests or referrals, if you look at the data between the 2 years, the number of students that were actually transported to juvenile hall was 1.
Okay, so we now move to board discussion. We'll start with Trustee Jones.
I will be voting no on this item for the same reason that I voted no in June. I just wanted to point out that allocating nearly $1 million to the SRO program, I believe, is in conflict with our own board equity policy. In addition, I'm concerned that the SRO program is also in conflict with the new Black Lives Matter pledge we passed at the last meeting, and we know that the SRO MOU did not follow the DOJ/DOE recommendations that were referenced in the documents that we claim to follow. So I will be voting no on the budget. I know I have opposed the MOU, and I will continue to do so based on the same reasons that I had before. One of the concerns that I have is in the handbook, there's a reference to a document which I think is very important from the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Justice, which outlines how districts' best practices for going about creating MOUs. And in the handbook, it says that we follow this. And this is one of the concerns I have. The first action step is in the process of creating and reviewing the MOU that there are certain groups that should be involved in that process. And we learned in the July meeting that we had not followed this process, that the MOU had not gotten the input from juvenile justice agencies, civil rights agencies, and community stakeholder groups, which include school administrators and educators. So that didn't happen, which was one of the reasons why I voted at the time not to support the MOU, because I think if we reference a process that we say we're following, we need to follow it, and we hadn't. So I'm wondering, with these changes that are being brought to us today, have these changes been reviewed by civil rights agencies, community stakeholder groups, and juvenile justice agencies, including administrators and educators? Have these changes gone before those groups, or is this coming solely from the folks in the room?
So many of those changes that you reference, yes, we are in the process. I don't know if I don't have the list before me, but I understand the Department of Justice recommendations that you're referencing. I truly believe in those as well. Those are great recommendations. It's important to keep in mind that we have no doubt that our program aligns with many of the best practices that we see around the country. So I welcome it. In fact, recently I proactively reached out to the NAACP for that very reason, because I wanted them to have their eyes on it. And so they have reviewed it. As I suspected, they felt like we have gone above and beyond to meet some of the concerns that the task force had and some members of our public. So, and I think we've recently reached out to a juvenile justice organization as well, and we're awaiting their review of this particular MOU. So that process is occurring to make sure that we align. But you might remember there's 5 recommendations in there, so that's the first, right? Mm-hmm. The other 4 that's represented there, we feel like we meet and exceed those recommendations with the current program that we have. And so that's a long way to say yes, we don't shy away from that. Again, I have the utmost confidence in this program, and I welcome any perspective that might add to the safety, security of our students and ensuring that we're considering their needs and protections as well.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I'm glad we're seeking the input from those organizations. I'm concerned that the process really, it says requiring involvement of school administrators and educators and community stakeholders, which I take to mean parents. And I'm not sure we had the involvement of those groups in this particular revision that we're seeing, and I think that's important. So I'm concerned that hasn't happened here.
Can I just talk on that just for 1 second? So the community stakeholder piece, and it's just an interpretation of the terms. I do have a community advisory group in which I early on presented this MOU and the policy to that group, because those are people that represent our community. And so if your preference was to have some sort of group that involved the parents, then I would have liked to have heard that a little bit earlier in the process, and we could have made sure that we agreed on what that term meant.
Right, and I think this is where, these are issues that I raised in July, that these community these organizations and community groups, including the admins, educators, community stakeholders, meaning parents, should be involved. That's something I raised in July. So anytime I see a revision to the MOU coming to us, I'm expecting to see the involvement of all of those groups, as the DOJ and DOE document outlines should happen and that we say we're following. Obviously, I want to be in compliance with the law, whatever laws apply. One of the concerns I have is seeing this come back to us right now with concerns that address the Police Officer Bill of Rights, which is a fine thing for us to address, but absent pieces that relate to protections for students that I think need to be added that I raised in July. We have a lot of things outlined in the handbook that go to student rights, but they're not in the MOU. And the MOU is the only thing that both entities sign. So that's the document that's binding on both parties. So I want to see those protections for students, that some of which are outlined in the handbook, added to the MOU so that it's clear and binding on both parties. And I'm not sure, I'm not seeing that reflected here. And I'm uncomfortable taking action to address one part of a problem that we have, which is addressing the Police Officer Bill of Rights, things that need to be in, without also addressing parts of what go to student rights that I feel should be embedded into the MOU.
Okay, yeah, I understand your point, but just like I think the handbook mentions the Department of Justice recommendations, is right? Mm-hmm. That's not necessarily binding as well. That's not in the MOU, correct? So I mean, it's we can go back and forth whether things that are in the handbook should go in the MOU or vice versa, but the MOU. I think we all agree that we want to abide by not only supporting the handbook and I think a great document that helps guide our decisions and how we operate, but also creating an MOU that has all of those specifics in there that really doesn't really outline the relationship and the agreement between the two parties. And so I just want to be clear, because it seems like we flop back and forth between the MOU and the handbook, and I just need to get some clarity on what it is that you want to happen. Do you want the handbook to be the MOU, or do you want an MOU that basically outlines the terms and agreements between the city and the district?
And I can only speak for myself. One of the issues that I raised in July is I had been looking at model MOUs between districts and SROs, and some of the models and some of the actual MOUs that I've seen put into place are more along the lines of what I've said, is that the MOU actually encompasses everything.
Yeah.
And that is a model that I think that our board should be following. When we passed this in July, the board discussion was that there was sentiment among trustees that it was a living document that we could amend and change, and there was, I think, some agreement that there were some improvements that we need to see from it, or we would like to see from it. And I'm concerned that what we're seeing here in this MOU is addressing some very specific issues that relate to the Police Officer Bill of Rights without addressing the other issues that trustees had at the time that we wanted to see. So I'm uncomfortable with this coming to us right now without addressing issues more comprehensively. I personally would like to see this tabled and come back to us later. I don't know if that's a possibility, but I really think we need to look at the MOU more holistically and not only address issues related to Police Officer Bill of Rights, but these other issues as well, and also get the involvement of the whole cadre of groups and stakeholders that are mentioned as being part of best practices.
Yeah, no, I understand. The first thing is that although I know you've done a lot of research on MOUs across the country or across the region, but what I think we developed is something that works best for the Fremont. And it's not one size fits all. And so the conversations that we've had over the last several months is with that objective. Our city, this school district, is different than many. And in fact, people look to us to try to mimic what we're doing here in Fremont. So although there might be MOUs that you feel are very beneficial to us to consider, and we will consider those, and we have considered those, we try to build a program on what works for this particular community and the interests of the district. I would also add that I'm not going to accept the fact that we're just changing something that has to do with the police officer's Bill of Rights. That is not accurate. Since July or the summer, we have gone above and beyond to make adjustments to how we operate, our policies, our procedures, our expectations, ensuring that our officers are well trained. You will not find another SRO program that has the comprehensive training program that we have put our officers through, whether it's tolerance, cultural diversity, de-escalation, you name it. And we can go down the list if we want, but no, I'm not going to accept that we just made the adjustment to the police officer's Bill of Rights. We complied with the law.
I appreciate that.
But hold on, I'm not quite done. We have to comply with the law. There's no debate there. So the adjustments that you're accusing us of making is necessary. So I don't even know why there's...
I'm not disputing the need for these adjustments, and I'm not disputing that you have made changes in the program that reflect better practices. What I'm seeing in the MOU, the changes to the MOU, are reflective of what we need to accommodate in terms of the police officer Bill of Rights. There are other things that I think should be included in the MOU that are maybe part of our new practices but still aren't written into the MOU that should be in the MOU. So, I appreciate all the work to improve the program. That I don't dispute. What I want to see is some of those things embedded into the MOU.
Or our policies and procedures, because we're bound by those as well. So that's my point, is that
Sure.
we keep flopping back between the handbook, the MOU. The MOU is a document that is an agreement between the two entities.
Right. And
our policies and procedures, we are bound by those as well. And I want the public to understand that as well. We follow policy and procedure. So if we put something in policy or procedure that diversion is our primary option whenever we encounter a kid who has committed a crime, then that's our policy. And if we don't follow that policy, there will be accountability. So I'm not clear where we can't embed all of our policies and procedures in an MOU. It's just not practical, and it's just not possible.
So I just want to thank you again very, very much for how you've handled this situation and how you've brought it forward. You've turned it around to make this a very positive experience, possibly the most advanced and positive SRO program in the country. We very well could be onto something like that. So I think all these different engagements that we've had over this year has produced a situation where the best interests of our students, and the best interests of our community are truly being reflected in the conversation we're having now. So thank you very much.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. And I just want to emphasize again, it's been because of CJ's leadership, my staff, that have really been responsive to everything that's going on. And you're absolutely right. What you all have done, as well as our community and parents, you've challenged us to be better. And we've accepted that challenge. And we've responded to that challenge. So when we are recognized as the best practice SRO program in the nation, you should take a bow, because you helped create that.
And just really quickly, I just wanted to acknowledge that I see improvement, and I very much appreciate your time and the explanations that you've given. That's very valuable. Unfortunately, I'm still going to be voting no, because I do believe that there are more significant improvements that we could make to the MOU. And I'll be voting no, but I appreciate the improvements, and I'm looking forward to January and those reports, and thank you for being here.
It is open for your votes. Thank you so much. That motion passes with 4 ayes. Trustees Zhang, Prasad, Campbell, and Sudi voting in favor, and Trustee Jones voting nay.
Thank you, Chief Washington, Lieutenant Tang, and Sergeant Tang.
Thank you.
Thank you.